Here are some quick tips to help you while you sew. In previous videos, we briefly went over how to change stitch length, stitch width, and tension on each individual machine. Let's look at how adjusting these values changes the way the machine sews. Stitch length will change how long each individual stitch is. On the left, you will see the longest stitch length that our Singer heavy-duty machine will sew. This can also be used as a basting stitch, which we will cover later in this video. On the right, you will see the shortest stitch length that the machine will sew. While this is demonstrated in this image with a straight stitch, this can be applied to all other stitch types as well. Stitch width changes how wide each stitch is with certain specialty stitches. This is only applicable to stitches like the zigzag stitch that don't sew in a straight line. On the left, you will see a wide stitch width. On the right, you will see a narrow stitch width. While this can be applied to stitches such as the straight stitch, many sewing machines that don't have a separate needle position setting will use the stitch width setting in its place. Tension is an important setting that controls how the sewing machine holds the thread. In most cases, you will only need to adjust the top thread's tension. This is a cross-section of a piece with ideal thread tension. As you can see, both the upper and the lower threads are locked perfectly in the middle of the fabric, meaning that you can't see the upper thread from the bottom or the lower thread from the top. This is a cross-section of a piece with incorrect thread tension. In this example, the upper thread is too loose, which makes the lower thread pull it through to the underside of the fabric. This can sometimes cause tangles. To fix this, increase the tension setting on the machine. This is another example of incorrect thread tension, except this time, the upper thread is too tight, which makes it pull the lower thread through the top side of the fabric. This can sometimes cause tangles as well. To fix this, decrease the tension setting on the machine. Tension is just one factor that affects how well the machine sews. In most cases, a tension setting of 4 to 6 is sufficient, but this can change depending on your fabric or stitch type. If adjusting the tension does not fix your issue, ask a Makerspace monitor for help. Here are a few of the tools that we have available in our Makerspace for you to use when you're sewing. If you have trouble threading a hand needle, you can use a needle threader to help. Insert the wire part of the needle threader into the eye of the needle, pass the thread through the wire loop, then pull the wire back out of the needle. This will draw the thread through the eye. Pins can help hold your fabric in place while you're working with your piece. Simply insert the pin into the fabric to use them. You may find that they can be difficult to use depending on your fabric. We also offer sewing clips that accomplish the same task but are generally easier to work with. Please be sure to remove any pins or clips while sewing before they reach the presser foot, as sewing into one can break the needle. You may find that you need to undo stitches. You can use a seam ripper to do this. Separate both pieces of fabric, then slide the seam ripper against it so that the bottom of the U shape is touching your stitches. Carefully pull the fabric towards you while moving the seam ripper forwards. Then remove the ripped thread. Cutting fabric with regular scissors is usually more difficult because they are too dull. We have dedicated fabric scissors in the Makerspace that are for fabric use only. We have regular fabric scissors, which cut a straight line, pinking shears, which cut a zigzag line, and a rotary cutter that you can use as well. To use the rotary cutter, press down on the larger button until you hear a click. Use a cutting mat under your work. With firm pressure, roll the cutter across your fabric to cut it. You can also use a ruler to cut straight lines. Be sure to retract the blade once finished by pressing the smaller button. You may find that some woven fabrics have a tendency to fray. There are a few ways to prevent this. The easiest way is to use pinking shears to cut your fabric. These cut in a zigzag line, which helps prevent fraying. You can also use fray check. Carefully drip the liquid onto the edges of your fabric before sewing. You will need to wait approximately 30 minutes for it to dry, and it may not be suitable for larger projects with a lot of edges. Please be careful not to ingest it or get it in your eyes. Another way to prevent fraying is to sew a zigzag stitch along the edges of your fabric. This can, however, have some unpredictable results depending on how thin your fabric is. A generally better option is the overcast stitch. This requires a special foot that has a bar on the bottom for stitches to grab onto. Line the edge of your fabric up with the metal piece on the right side of the foot. As you sew, the thread will go around the bar.
When you finish, pull the piece towards the back of the machine to pull the stitches off the bar. Now we will go over some common stitching techniques. One common use of sewing machines is sewing hems. Most patterns will tell you how much of the fabric you should fold over and how far away you should stitch from the edge. You can use clips or pins to keep everything in place while sewing. Lining the edge of your fabric up with one of the measurements engraved into the needle plate can help you keep everything even. Going slow will often give you a better result. To sew around corners, sew as you normally would until you reach your seam allowance, which is usually around 1/4 of an inch, depending on your project. With the needle in the fabric, raise the presser foot and pivot your fabric around by 90 degrees. Continue sewing in that direction. To sew curves, sew a few stitches going in one direction, stop with your needle in the fabric, lift the presser foot, and pivot slightly, following the curve. Keep doing this until you reach the end of the curve. Basting stitches are often used to temporarily fix pieces in place. They are essentially just really long straight stitches. To perform a basting stitch, select the straight stitch on the machine. Then increase the stitch length to as long as it will go. Basting stitches are usually sewn without backstitching. You can also use basting stitches to create ruffles. Make sure that you don't backstitch for this method. Gently pull the threads on one side of the piece and scrunch up the fabric. Go a little bit at a time or else you may break the thread. Also, keep in mind that you don't want to slide the fabric off the other end of the threads. Once you have gathered the ruffles sufficiently, you can tie a knot at each end to secure them in place. Sometimes you may need to sew thicker fabric that the presser foot can't climb over. If you notice that the presser foot sits at an angle, ensure that it is raised and use your hand to hold the presser foot flat. Many general-purpose feet have locking pins on the side. Press this pin inwards while lowering the presser foot. As you sew, the locking pin will snap back to its original position.